Okay, let me introduce these two gentlemen. I have Representative Jason Isaac and Representative Alan Fletcher, and we're really grateful to have you here today to share your perspective on the upcoming legislative session and take questions from some of the folks in the crowd here. Both of these gentlemen have been in the legislature a little while, have some experience of what works, what doesn't work, and we're going to be very interested in their perspectives going forward. I've got a few canned questions, and the first one I'm going to just start with is, what do you expect? You know, there's been some changes of the legislature, sort of following up on your comment, that there's many new faces coming in. We have a change in leadership in the Senate. What do you think, what's your crystal ball saying we're going to be working on this upcoming session, and what can we expect? Is there any comments related to energy, water, air, you know, some of the issues that have been facing public health and safety issues as well in the state? So I'll let you both.
You want me to go first? My hair is grayer than his, so. No, I'm really excited. I'm sure this is a bipartisan crowd, but Jason and I are both conservative Republicans, and we're really excited about the fact that in the great state of Texas, we truly have I see a nodding head out there. We're really excited about the fact that we have all of our new statewide. It's the first time in my lifetime, and most of you in this room, that we've had all 6 statewide offices be replaced by Republicans coming from an administration that had all Republicans. So we've got a huge responsibility to move forward. We've got a majority in the Senate, a huge majority in the House. That's replicated across the nation in the midterms. I think you all saw that recently. And we know that this next legislative session that the people of Texas are expecting us to do something. Jason and I have both had the opportunity to serve through legislative sessions where we had a multi-billion-dollar shortfall, and now we're going to have the opportunity to serve with quite a large surplus. And it's a huge responsibility. A lot of folks come to us because they know we have a surplus and they think that, you know, it's a candy store. But we're going to have to be very frugal about how we spend these monies because we've got a lot of deficits, a lot of issues in the state. You know, we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. The state of Texas has some huge monies coming into our, you know, general fund. Our economic stabilization fund that Mr. Taylor alluded to is somewhere where we can make decisions about how we spend and allocate monies. But, you know, I feel my IQ going up in this room. There's a lot of knowledge here. The one thing that we as legislators try to do is tap into the folks of this great state, the folks that are our constituents, the folks that we interact with throughout the state. I'm sure Jason would agree with me. Our title is state representative. I'm District 130. What is your number? 45. He's 45, but we actually 99% of everything that we vote on and pass legislation on is for the entire state of Texas. It's rare that our legislation is specific unto our district alone. So I have some cards. A friend of mine back here, Stu Tillman with Cirrus, someone that I've had the opportunity to know and be involved with his family and through church and through our community for many years, and real entrepreneur, someone that has a great understanding of this industry and someone that has educated me about what's going on in the state right now with respect to the energy and air quality. And Todd and I talked about it last night. I'm excited about some of the things that I think we can do this next session, but we're going to depend on you to make us aware of what's important to the state and what's important to the industry and important to our constituents. So I'll stop now and let Jason say a few words, and then we'll get into some of the specific questions, and hopefully we can answer some questions that you might have.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. So I think we're going to see some more budget transparency this session. That has been a big issue that several committees have been looking at in areas that we can make improvements. I think we're going to, and I think you have some questions on TURP and some transparency issues that we have there and some funds that we have available that aren't being used. I think we're going to see some significant improvements in those areas. But I think we were sitting at breakfast this morning, and Alan, Representative Fletcher, talked about the margins tax, and that's really one of these things that kind of motivated me to run for office in 2010. I've worked in the trucking industry for years, marketing technology to trucking companies, trying to help them be more efficient and more safe. And this margins tax, they changed it in 2006, and it started to have a direct impact on my ability to provide for my family, because you saw 10% of businesses in the state of Texas see a 500% increase. And so I know there's a lot of business owners in here we are diligently working to try to get rid of the margins tax altogether. But one of the steps in the right direction that we made last session is we made permanent the $1 million exemption. So if you're a small business or you're a business that makes less than $1 million in revenue, you are now permanently exempt from the margins tax. But the problem was up until, and I had some businesses calling me last year, literally a year ago, saying, hey, I'm going to push over $1 million for the first time this year, and this is 2013. And I said, I'm going to give you some advice. You probably want to hold off a couple of months and push some orders into January. I said, because if you make $1,001, you're going to owe tax on $1,001. If you make $999,099.99, you don't owe tax on that. So what we did is we created our last legislative session $1 million deduction. So for every business in the state of Texas that makes over $1 million in revenue, not profit, revenue, because we tax on revenue now, you now have $10,000 at your disposal to invest in efficiency, to invest in employees, in training, in equipment. And that's every single business in the state of Texas that makes over $1 million in revenue will now have additional $10,000 in their pocket. When you add up the deduction and the exemption the deduction that we made permanent in this new exemption, it's $1.3 billion in tax cuts to the state of Texas and to the businesses to create jobs and create economic opportunities. And so that was one of the things that I was most proud of that we got done last legislative session. And now we're going to continue to do some great work, and hopefully we can raise that $1 million to $2.5 million or $5 million and keep chipping away at it, because I tend to believe our government has enough of our money. We just need to do a better job spending it. And so I'll be fighting any and every opportunity there is to get more of your money, because I just don't think we need it. I think we need to do a better job of spending it. I think you can manage your money well enough, and we want to keep it in your pockets.
I think that's a huge statement. I think Jason and I both agree that there's a lot of bureaucratic overreach. Since he and I arrived in the legislature, we've tried to work hard to make sure that you as business owners and the people of this state have control of your business and what you need to do with your monies. I'm totally convinced that the folks in this room know more about what you need to do with your finances and the monies that you make and the monies you generate and the benefit that you provide for the people of Texas than the government in Austin does. And it's my responsibility, and I know Jason concurs with me, to do everything we can to make sure that legislatively we give you that ability to spend your monies and make the decisions that are good for the people of the state of Texas and in your industry. Let that fall back into your court. We want you to make those decisions. We don't need to be doing it in Austin.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to take the next questions for Representative Isaac, focused on the TERP program. And what are your thoughts related to the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan? It currently has almost $800 million of money that has been collected from Texans and had not been appropriated to what the legislature wanted it appropriated for. What do you see, the future looking like for TERP? Do you see any changes or TERP tune-ups that need to be done to the legislation, or is it strictly going to be focused on the appropriations piece?
I think the significant piece is going to be the appropriations piece, and I really see, because it's over $800 million of funds that have been collected that were intended for, and it's about 6 different funding sources. It's a 2% diesel engine surcharge, a small portion of our vehicle registrations and licensing and title fees that we all pay as consumers. Just a small percentage of that goes in to fund the Texas Emission Reduction Plan. It generates about $172 million, and we spend about $77 million. So there's a $95 million that's not spent, that's supposed to be spent. And I think when we get into our budget transparency, we're going to see that money getting spent this next session. I think that $800 million, there's some talk that potentially get moved over into a fund, a separate fund, which I think would be a good thing. Let's take it out of the budgeting process, and let's move that money over there. And then let's spend everything that we collect. Now, there is also some talk that maybe one of those registration fees that generates $20 or $40 million, that goes away as a sort of a compromise. Because right now that $800 million is used to certify the budget as a balanced budget, when in all actuality, it's kind of funny math, and we're truly not. So we've got to clean that up. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a small reduction from that $172 million, maybe down to 140, 150 million area, and then we start to appropriate all of it, which would be a significant increase in the amount of dollars that we are appropriating. one of the technical tweaks that I would personally like to make is ethanol is considered an alternative fuel, and I don't believe it's efficient or it's clean when it's burned. It may have a place for it, but my feelings are that it's driving up food costs around the world. You're seeing obesity rates skyrocket in Mexico because they consume about 40% of their daily nutrition comes from corn. And when that cost goes up, their obesity rates increase. They're moving to more processed food products that are typically, what are common in the American diet and have led to increased obesity rates here in the United States. But corn is corn on the commodity market. There is no white corn, no yellow corn. There's no corn for fuel. There's no corn for food. Corn is corn. And so when you increase the cost of corn, you're increasing the cost of food for people. And in some cases, it's people that can least likely afford to have their food costs increase. And so I would like to see ethanol removed as an alternative fuel. And one of the reasons is you have state agencies like TxDOT where and all these agencies are required. If you're buying vehicles, you're supposed to buy alternative fuel vehicles, a certain percentage of them, whether they're electric, natural gas, ethanol, propane, these vehicles that burn cleaner and reduce our emissions throughout the state. And what you see is, TxDOT, and I was at a natural gas summit, a couple months ago with Commissioner Porter that he hosted this event in Austin, and I'd shouted out that TxDOT has over 10,000 vehicles, and earlier this year they had 25 that were natural gas, just 25. And someone else shouted out, "We're 44!" And I was like, "Wow, gosh, that's a career limiting move." Some guy yelling at a legislator and bragging about being up to 44, and he disappeared. I never saw who he was, but I was like, "Wow, you should pat yourself. Don't break your arm there, buddy." Yeah, you're 44, and the problem is they're buying E85 vehicles and considering those are meeting the requirements as being an alternative fuel, and they're not, in my opinion. And so I would that's kind of a personal thing that I have, that I want to get ethanol out of TERP as not being an alternative fuel, because I don't believe that it reduces emissions. If there are scientists in the room that want to tell me otherwise and that convince me that it doesn't drive up food costs, I'd be willing to listen, because I'm not an environmental expert. I'm a legislator that works for about 175,000 people in House District 45, and so I like to learn, but we have got to inquire and really start to kind of hammer down on our state agencies to really lead. If we want to lead in some of these building efficiencies and emission reduction, then we can't just sit around and talk about doing it and saying, you need to do this, you need to do this. We have got to lead as the state in making sure that our buildings are the most efficient, that we are the ones that are spending our dollars as efficiently as possible. And if we do that by reducing our energy costs, by having the most efficient buildings, by having the most fuel efficient vehicles on the road, then that's going to help out economic opportunities for other people, because it'll reduce the costs. The economies of scale will come into effect, and it'll reduce the cost for individuals to go out and buy either electric or natural gas vehicles, because the state is buying so many and ultimately saving money and cleaning our air at the same time. So those are just some of my thoughts on TERP this session, but I think we're going to see a significant amount of money move into the program, more so than before.
Before we move on, I want to make a comment based on what he just said, just for a matter of information. We have, as he indicated, 175,000 individuals in our respective House districts. In 2010, when the census was taken, I had it was 169,000 then, and then we went to 175. I had 87,000 too many people in my district, so I had to draw the lines to cut out 87,000 folks. We voted on this in 2012. By the time we were doing that, it was already determined that we were going to move up to 175,000, but I had 250,000 in my district. And right now in the great state of Texas, 12 to 1,500 people a day are moving in. 1,000, 70% of those 12 to 1,500 a day are moving to the Houston metropolitan area, and 40% of them are moving out between, in my district, 290 and all the way over to 45. So the growth that we're representing, and Jason is a leader in the House, and myself, I'm the only member of transportation from the Harris County for the last two sessions, and this last time someone used a seniority pick to be at my ribbon cuttings. But we joke about the fact that it's a huge responsibility. There's 25 members of the Texas House are from the Harris County alone, and so it's a big responsibility, the growth and the infrastructure that we're seeing down there because of the energy and the ports. And But when Jason talks about, you know, the amount of people that he's, you know, is representing, his leadership in the House and the growth that we're experiencing in Dripping Springs and in the suburbs of Austin where he is in God's country, I call it the Hill Country, you know, we've got a lot of opportunity to make a difference. So we're looking forward to working with you and getting information and feedback from you about what we need to do, because the growth in the industry that y'all are behind and involved in is replete in our two respective districts, to say the least.
Right. One sort of comment on TERP for those in the audience that may be more focused on buildings. It's one of the few programs in the state that Texas and the federal government, EPA, get along on, because it's a voluntary program. It helps truckers, you know, replace their trucks. It modernizes fleets. It creates jobs. It creates local sales tax revenue in areas because everybody's modernizing their fleet. They're getting a cleaner truck, safer truck on the road. So it's sort of one of these win-win programs that's really benefited folks.
And maybe this 880 million is some kind of magic number. You know, we're talking about transparency in government. Jason and I are sitting before you as two members of the House. We're two of the 23 that voted against the budget. I had a problem with the fact that there was only $480 million allocated for TxDOT and transportation. Our governor agreed. We had two special sessions, or really a third, to address that. But I can tell you that there was another fund, $880 million, that magic number, for low-income families with to keep heat on in the winter and air on in the summer. And 67 cents on every one of your light bills for decades was coming out of your light bill. It was an enumerated charge. And it grew to $880 million. For transparency purposes, we decided we were going to give $500 million of that back to the low-income families of Texas and take the other $380 million and put those monies into, you know, a fund that draws money until we decide as a legislature how we're going to continue that program and spend those monies. I couldn't get anybody to tell me how many low-income families there were and how they were going to divide up the $500 million, and I didn't want to vote for that. I certainly wasn't going to vote for a budget that had $480 million in it for TxDOT when they were asking for $4 billion. I see hands going up. I don't know if we're at the question section yet, but I'm ready to take them if you want them.
I'm going to ask one more question,
Sure.
and then we'll open. There's a microphone here, so if you want to get in line for
They won't do that. People
Great
won't do
questions.
that.
You can get behind, right in front of me. There's a microphone in the center of the room if you want to ask questions.
And real quick on TERP, one thing I want to point out, if you're not all aware, if you want to go out and buy a new electric or natural gas vehicle today, there are $2,500 grants that are available. As of a couple of months ago, what we had seen, the numbers that I had seen is 499 applicants had taken that $2,500 grant for electric vehicles, and only 6 had taken them for natural gas vehicles. So we've got some hurdles to overcome on the natural gas. As Representative Fletcher mentioned, we are Texas is the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and there's been some great editorials just over the last week about how Saudi Arabia is really at war with Texas, and they're pumping a ton of oil into the market to drive the prices down because they don't want us to become independent. They want us dependent on their oil sources, energy, so they're making that a cheap energy. But we've got clean, affordable, and plentiful natural gas right here in the state of Texas, and we did a lot of stuff in TERP to really drive the use of natural gas. But those are available for electric and natural gas vehicles. I know there are a lot of companies that are buying natural gas light-duty trucks and not taking the grants. They just don't want to fill out the paperwork. The mentality is we're going to save that grant for somebody else. But we've got some issues with some of the truck stuff on TERP where you've got to have 75 trucks. You've got to agree to replace 25 of them. That's a big investment for some companies. And you've got a lot of independent contractors, owner-operators in the state of Texas that have one truck. Or if they've grown their business, they've got a buddy to drive for them and they've got 2 trucks. And these are typically old trucks that are working around the ports or working within metropolitan areas. They're typically working in non-attainment areas. And we have got to find a way to offer them an incentive where it's just a no-brainer for them to get out of their old truck and get into a new truck, whether it's burning diesel. Ideally, it's burning natural gas. Electric's not an option in the truck industry. But we've got to find a way to do that. So I would welcome any feedback from you. I've mentioned this to the Trucking Association, but those are usually the companies that have more than 75 trucks. So we've got to find a way to reach the independent contractors and owner-operators and see if we can come up with a program that just makes it a no-brainer for them to start burning natural gas or cleaner diesel, and especially in those non-attainment areas.
Great. Look forward to working with you.
Has anybody here had a chance to drive the new Tesla? They showed up at my office the other day, and I had a chance to drive one of their top of the line. They said it was like a $90,000 vehicle, 4-door. I was absolutely blown away I couldn't get over the fact that it was so quiet. It just complete silence. And the young man that brought it out said, "Well, Representative, can you hear your iPad?" And that's what it is. It's a big computer. And you get in the car and you touch the brake and it's on. And I've never in my life, when we were kids, had the little electric cars and you'd hit the thing and the car would take off and run off the track. That's what this thing does. When you touch it, it's 0 to whatever faster than you can even realize it. But they're so quiet and they're an amazing vehicle. And I'm a free market capitalist conservative Republican, and I don't understand that the industry at this point in Texas is pretty well pushing back. We sold like 1.5 million new automobiles this year. And they've only sold a couple of hundred of those, and they literally send them to your house like UPS. They get your home. It gets delivered to your home because there's really no place to have a dealership in Texas. But the cost is this time next year it's going to be like $35,000 for their economy vehicle that they could provide. They also talked to me about all the fuel stations. It costs nothing to stop up in Corsicana or Columbus going out 10, and then of course the metropolitan areas all have the charging stations. It's like 3 hours for a full charge overnight, but when you're on the road and you stop, you can actually charge up in less than 30 minutes. They have like a 380-mile range now, which is starting to get reasonable where you can do it. And they said it'll be twice that, this time, like next year when they do the new batteries. The car is also, I'm not here selling them, I'm just making the comment that I'm of the opinion that.
Checking your personal financial
Yeah,
statement.
I don't have any, but on that or any money, period. But we're in the legislature, But no, seriously, I want you to know that in this industry, I see this as something that's very clean, it's very effective, and it's like, maybe its time has come, and I would like to see, and we're going to have to work with the Texas Car Association, all the vehicles and all the energy companies, about making this possible in Texas, and I would think that this group would be one that would be receptive to that. But if I'm mistaken, tell me. But the reality of it is, they're going to be, you just can't stop progress, and it's really special.
The first supercharging station in the state of Texas was in San Marcos, Texas.
There you go.
That's great.
In House District 45.
All right, Todd.
Okay, I'm going to ask you sort of a little bit different question for this audience, but I know one that's sort of near and dear to your heart, Representative Fletcher. Your background in public safety, do you have any thoughts about legislation that would avoid another West Texas tragedy or improve safety at refineries, chemical plants, potentially avoiding the deaths that recently happened down in LaPorte last week?
Well, I can tell you that, well, first of all, I'm the only retired peace officer in the legislature. That's a huge responsibility. This will be my 4th term, and every session I look to see if there's another old cop coming my way. But, there's 250,000 men and women in the great state of Texas that are first responders and peace officers, and they tend to call me, and I'm quite honored about that responsibility. But as the Vice Chair of Homeland Security and Public Safety, we've had the opportunity this last interim to address the West explosion. And I do think that it's an aberration. I think it's something that, it's a 100-year flood kind of situation. It's something that hadn't happened a lot. But that doesn't matter, it happened. So we lost, lives, and we needed to make some changes. One of the things that I've had to hold the line on is the chairman of that committee is a Democrat. And he's outnumbered by Republicans on that committee. And his initial bill had some federal oversight involved in it. And we let him know in no uncertain terms that that wasn't coming out of that committee, because I want to see the fertilizer industry, I want to see the businesses in Texas being charged, and oversight. I want oversight to be Texas agencies to address that. And I think we have enough in place in Texas to make that happen, because we haven't had a serious problem. It's very serious to the families that lost loved ones. It's a lot of property damage, to say the least. But we're going to put in some regulations and look at some things, but we're going to try to make sure that it's something that's being handled, and the oversight of that will be regulated by Texas. Now, there's plenty of federal laws and federal rules in place right now to address, but I find it all to be punitive. I see them trying to do nothing more than fine the companies after the fact, after they've had someone get hurt. And what I'd like to see is Texas itself put in place some regulations and some guidelines that keep the accidents from happening. Because I see the federal government, and I'm not trying to be a hater, but I see the federal government as taking fines from multi-billion-dollar corporations that's pocket change to them. And I want to see the Texas facilities, I want to see Texas legislature put regulations in place that keep this from happening, period, so we don't lose lives. So And I think that we can do that, and I think we will because of some of the accidents you've talked about. And I know that the time we've spent on the West explosion, I've been to D.C. 3 times. We had to go up there and talk to our Texas delegation about the fact that, you know, our president told us that he would be there for West, and as soon as the cameras went off and the lights turned off, he disappeared, and they didn't declare it a natural disaster. They didn't help us. They didn't help us with the funding, just like they're not helping us on border security right now with the funding. And our Texas delegation stepped up. I want you to know that men like Ted Poe and Michael McCall and Kevin Brady and John Culberson, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but there was a lot of it, Louis Gohmert, John Cornyn, Senator Cruz, they stepped up and got the funding for the federal government to get us the monies back for the West explosion. But we did have to go up there and tell them that we'd passed a resolution in the Texas House that Jason helped me on, a resolution in the House to say that that was the monies that Texas needed back. So we got that taken care of. And, you know, we do work very well with our congressmen. I know everybody wants to badmouth, and they talk about how the Congress has this low, approval rating. But we keep electing them, we keep sending them back. And the men and women that are there that represent Texas are the ones that we chose. I will tell you, there's a real poor turnout. People need to turn out and vote. Tell your friends to vote. I mean, I want to see folks get out there with their photo ID and vote. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll, if you don't mind, I'll comment a little bit about this. And I've been in touch with representatives from DuPont, I think just about every day since Sunday when I first heard about the accident that happened in LaPorte.
It's his business.
It being on the House Committee on Environmental Regulation, it's something I'm passionate about. And when we have accidents like this, it's very unfortunate, especially when it involves fatalities like what happened with DuPont. You lost 4 lives there because of a faulty valve where you had methyl mercaptan leak for a period of time, and methyl mercaptan is used as a odorant for natural gas. So natural gas in its normal state is odorless, and so they add methyl mercaptan so that you can actually smell it. So if you have a leak in your home, you smell it. It is extremely, extremely powerful, and it's like 1/1 millionth of a ratio is 1/1 millionth to 1 part of natural gas because it has such a strong odorant. So it's very unfortunate this happened, and I know DuPont has an incredible safety record, and it's unfortunate that they're now getting kind of raked over the coals on this. But we'll get to the bottom of this. It's still very fresh and very new. And then you had the issue about a year ago, and I can't remember the specific dates, but we had the bunker fuel spill in Galveston, and I went down there and put the bunny suit on, the white suit with the the pullover shoes, slippers, and walked around on the beaches and walked around on some of the rocks right there where the spill happened. And so it just, and really I was kind of there. I wanted to see how the process was coming along and cleaning this up. And I was so impressed with the General Land Office, with Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the Coast Guard, and their response in cleaning this up. And it was the first time I've ever seen anybody mopping grass. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were mopping bunker fuel, bunker oil off of grass and cleaning it up. The response was incredible. It was nice to know that our tax dollars that are set aside for these incidences were being used properly in cleaning up the beaches around Galveston. But one thing that we need to do is we've got to continue to drive the demand for using cleaner fuels, and that's that if bunker fuel wasn't used to power vessels, then we wouldn't have had this spill. And now you'll see at the end of this year, Shell is delivering their first fully powered, 100% dedicated liquefied natural gas vessel that will be used just like what was that bunker fuel was used for, running oil field equipment out to these deep water platforms. And Shell, I'm proud that they're taking the lead on this, using a Texas fuel to power a vessel that's cleaner, especially because they operate a lot in these non-attainment areas like the Port of Houston and in the area. So we've got to get away from bunker fuel. You're starting to see asphalt companies here in the Metroplex that are moving away from bunker fuel, which they use to heat asphalt. They use about 10,000 gallons a week of bunker fuel, which is oil from our cars and our oil changes. They're using old, dirty, recycled oil, which does not burn very clean, and they're converting to using liquefied natural gas. So moving these cleaner fuels, it'll stop the demand for them, and then we won't have these spills.
Speaking of the port, when you mentioned about running the fuel out, by virtue of being on transportation, I've been very involved in the dredging prospects for the Port of Houston. I don't know if you're aware of the fact, but that the super Panamax ships they're widening the Panama Canal, and these ships are so large that you can put 2 of our state capitol. And a lot of you, I know, I've seen you there. if you stand in front of our state capitol, think about how big that building is. You can put 2 of them end to end inside the cargo hull of these ships. Wow. Lady Liberty, if you look up to the top, the containers can be stacked that high. These ships have a 52-foot draw, and we have 48-foot draw in the Port of Houston. There's 27 ports along the coast of Texas. Not one of them has a 52-foot draw. That means the state of Texas cannot receive one of these Super Panamax ships. There's 2 on the west coast and 2 on the east coast. Long Beach and Seattle on the west, the naval base in Virginia and New York on the east. Miami, being Miami, they did a little dog and pony with balloons and fireworks and cruised in an empty one with empty containers on the deck, skimming across the top to make the folks think that they can do it, but they can't. But know this, folks, we've had TWIA, and we're addressing that now. And how are you going to sell to somebody in the panhandle of Texas that you need to increase fees on everything that they do in the state of Texas, which fees are taxes any way you cut it? Because we've got to dredge $1 billion a foot of silt out of the Port of Houston so we can receive these Super Panamax ships. And by the way, it's $1 billion a year, because after we spend $4 billion to go from 48 feet to 52 feet, before we finish dredging the $4 billion project of 4 feet, another billion would have sloughed back in. Wow. So it's an ongoing process, one we're going to have to address. The state of Texas, you know, the way I believe this, and I know Jason will back me up on this, so goes Texas, so goes America, so goes the world. And as far as finances go, state of Texas is $1.6 trillion GDP. We have a $181 billion biannual budget. Any one of you would like to have a $91 billion a year budget that was running $1.5 trillion industry or business? That's pretty good. Great state of Texas is doing good. But if we get shut out of what's happening with the Super Panamax ship, the Chinese government has come into the port of Jamaica in Kingston, spent billions of dollars on their infrastructure. They're planning on staging containers there to disseminate them throughout the Western Hemisphere. The port of Kingston is the 3rd largest deep water port in the world, 480 feet. That God did that, 480 feet deep. And so we as a state have to address that, something we'll be dealing with this next legislative session through transportation. But this industry will be truly affected by the fact that all along the Port of Houston and the expansion of the port and what we're going to be involved in that and how we're going to address that issue. So I look forward to working with some of the credentialed individuals in here that can surely bring me some good information about what we need to do in the Port of Houston as we expand our role in Texas and in the world.
Great. I'm going to ask one question, and then we're going to open up to the questions on the floor. This is back to the. We've got 25 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. This crowd here in this audience has been working very hard to save taxpayers money on their energy bills through efficient use of buildings and building codes that can be done in a way that pay back many times for the investment up front. And the state has done a lot with investing in a market-based energy efficiency programs through when we deregulated the power industry. At the time, Texas was like number 1 or number 2 on providing ways of investing in energy efficiency so that we could get a payback year after year after year.
Now we're 38.
Now we're 33rd. And do you have any sort of thoughts about, is there a way that Texas can sort of leverage its expertise and its entrepreneurship to cause more investment in energy efficiency and things that are going to pay or lower ratepayers' bills year after year after year? Do you have any thoughts on some of that stuff that could be coming up this session? Maybe Jason started.
Yeah, and I talked a little bit about this, where we've got to really have our state agencies lead and take the leadership on this to help out with the economies of scales. And so maybe there's some things that we need to mandate that our state agencies do and look a little bit closer at some of their rules and the requirements that we have to really create a good incentive for them to pass these efficiencies along to taxpayers. We know we're the #1 wind generation state for electricity. When you look at our diversity of our electric generation market, I applaud your efforts. Since 2001, our electric generation costs have increased 22% in the country. And it's because it's a very diversified portfolio. We've got a good mix of natural gas, a good mix of coal, wind, solar, and nuclear. In Texas, since 2001, those costs have actually gone down. The cost of electricity since 2001 has actually gone down very marginally. and that's impressive, that in the state of Texas, we are actually paying less for electricity today than we were in 2001. And that has a lot to do with the work that you have done. And I imagine a lot of that was a result because we were in the top of creating opportunities for more efficient use of electricity. And so we've got to get back there. We've got to get back up to the top. And so I welcome your ideas. During that same time frame, I talk about 2001, and I talk about this a lot, and I'll be talking about this later this morning. You look at our transportation fuel, and we're 99% petroleum based. And so you hear me talk about propane, natural gas, electric. That's less than 1% of the fuel that drives our transportation network in the United States. And in that same time frame that in America costs have gone up 22% on electricity, cost for transportation fuel has gone up 187%. 187%. So if you really want some predictability in your businesses, we need to diversify that transportation portfolio. Talk about increasing efficiency and having some predictability. I think a 22% increase over 14 years is something that you could manage within a business. 187% increase over 14 years is very hard to manage. So we've got to increase the diversity on our transportation fuel like we have with electricity, and then continue to really create opportunities so that we do drive efficiencies within our electric generation, because our power needs are going to continue to grow astronomically in this state. So the more that we can save, then we're going to continue to reduce emissions. We're better than 32 other states when you look at the amount of kilowatt hours produced and our emissions. So we're better than 32 other states on a kilowatt per hour basis, but we produce a lot more energy than a lot of those states. So we do have a lot of emissions in our state. We do a much better job, again, better than 32 other states. We've got to continue to do that and continue to lead. We've done great work since TURP has been in place since 2000 and cleaning up our air, and we've got to continue to do that. So I really look to you, the audience, for ideas and suggestions and things that we can do, and knowing that we are free market conservatives and we don't want to mandate all these building codes down to the state and local governments, or the state government is fine, but we don't want to push them down to the consumers, and we don't want to have this statewide initiative that says every home has to meet this certain energy level, because that's just going to drive up the cost. Maybe on the front side, maybe in the long run, it saves money, but we need to let the consumers be able to choose that. But from a state side, I mean, we manage the state, and if we can mandate the state do these things to save taxpayer dollars, then we welcome those ideas from you. So I really look to you for feedback and ideas on how we can make some improvements and get back up towards the top in energy efficiency.
Well, and I agree with everything you just said, and I want to make a comment that sometimes you talk about all these rankings. We're number one in the nation in Medicaid fraud, and we're number one in the nation in cargo theft. Neither one of those sound good, but it's because of our size and our growth. And when we talk about going from first or second down to 33rd, that's what the exact number is. It's based on our growth in our industry and what's going on. But from a standpoint of full disclosure, I'm the benefactor of, not financially but personally, of the serious error. This is how I got involved. Stu Tillman's sitting back here with Cositron. My home, you see the sunbeams coming through. We're talking about this at breakfast with the dust particles. I was talking to Dub about it. Glenn Hager was my senator before he became controller, and we were joking that Glenn Hager's parents are my constituents and my parents are Glenn Hager's constituents, so we had to be good to each other. And I think Glenn's going to be a great comptroller over the finances with respect to energy, because you noticed a while ago his name was on one of those bills, and he'll help us. But we've talked about the fact that when you talk about us getting involved, the government and the state agencies, I want to keep our builders and stuff, and those of you in the industry, from being hit with fees and monies that you have to pass on to my constituents and the consumers, because there's all kinds of rules and regulations that keep, we're requiring you to pump bad air into buildings and into facilities and into homes, because you're requiring to change out the air, but you're taking air from outside and putting it in. And then this good air that I'm getting in my home with the serious air, where it's completely changed how many of us have had to change out those nasty filters? They just look horrible. And I couldn't believe we don't even have them anymore. And you wake up in the morning and you're not stopped up. I mean, it's just amazing what's going on with technology. And it's just like what I was talking about a while ago, all of the new technologies that are coming into play with the electric cars and all that. I'm excited about these things. And I do not want government, and I know Jason agrees with me, we will not impede you in doing what you have learned and what the technology you're developing to make these things better for our constituents, for the people of Texas. And if you run into the government, if the government is stopping you from doing something, if some regulation or some bureaucratic overreach is stopping you, please come to us. I know it sounds kind of counterproductive, but you're coming to the government to fix the fact that the government is stopping you. But we're the only ones that can have the opportunity in our committees with our peers to change the law to where government doesn't impede you in doing your job. And so I'm going to be talking to Mr. Taylor in his leadership role in the controller's office, talking to Glenn because we're personal friends, and dealing with the reality that there's things that we can do in the state of Texas that will let companies like yours, like Cirrus, like all the others of you on this board up here, do what you're trying to do for your companies and for the people of Texas without us getting in your way. So, questions?
Chris?
Oh, somebody did come to the mic.
I'm gonna start. My name is Baman Yazdani. I'm with the Energy Systems Lab, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself because I'm gonna get myself fired. Otherwise. So first of all, I want to thank you, Representative Fletcher, Representative Isaac, for being here. This means a whole lot to us for y'all being here.
Thank you.
It was a great news to hear that you're going to review the TERP funds. I just want to tell you that it does need a major review on how it's allocated. Even though we have about over $800 million surplus in that fund, ESL, again, I'm talking on my behalf, ESL is dying on the vine because the funds or its budget was cut one time 5% and the other time 50%. And this is the agency, this is the organization that actually determines the impact of the TERP on the state of Texas and all of that. You will hear from Dr. Haberl in a little bit about what effect or what impact TERP has had on state of Texas and state of Texas economy. It has had amazing results. Give you an example. Thanks to the Home Builders Association, Ned Munoz, for example, here, and all the other entities, State Energy Conservation Office, Dub Taylor, and others, who came together and, of course, passed these TERP laws with Senator Buster Brown early on, and just give you a little impact of what this has done is since 2002, because Senate Bill 5 was enacted in 2001, but it got effective 2002. Up to 2013, there has been a $2.9 billion savings as a result of the energy codes. So thank you so very much for your leadership in the House and wanting to improve that. The other thing, as far as the economic impact on state of Texas's economy, I like to suggest maybe looking at a technology that's been existing for the past 25 years, which Texas A&M actually developed. It's called continuous commissioning. It's existing building commissioning is called also, or retro commissioning. This actually would have a 15 to 20% savings, and you can start that off with the state of Texas's buildings and facilities. It would have a major impact. So
What's it called again?
it's called retro commissioning or continuous commissioning, which is basically a building tune-up. It does not require capital investment, but it has a tremendous savings. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Tom Smith, or Smitty. I run Public Citizens Texas office. Thank you both very much for coming. And I've got a question that I think both of you have some significant interest in, and that is the Port of Houston, if it becomes a super Panamex port, is going to grow about 40% over the next decade. And if you got better numbers, I haven't seen.
Oh, I think that's a good number.
But with that growth comes tremendous challenges in terms of pollution. And one of the things that the House bill that Jason sponsored last time extended, and so we go back in and we can retrofit the old drayage vehicles. But with the old trucks that are used to haul stuff, they're typically 30 years old or so, that are the first generation trucker. But with the growth, one of the questions that I've been thinking about, and with the impending 8-hour ozone restrictions, they're going to really make it difficult for Houston to ever comply with ozone. One of the opportunities I see is if there is a way to structure legislation that would help the industry in Houston, the ports, install electrified vehicles or put in natural gas fueling stations and natural gas vehicles as they're expanding, and require significant electrification of a lot of the drayage vehicles, or incent it to reduce the growth in air pollution that's likely to happen with the growth in the port. And so I'm wondering if you all might be interested in working on something like that as a strategy to help ozone, or Houston comply with the ozone and reduce all the other pollutants that come from diesel.
Definitely, and I talked earlier about if we're going to talk about this, we can't be pointing fingers. We've got to say we're going to take the lead. And so I had the Port of Houston Authority ask me to come and put on a summit to talk to fleets and to port operators and all the businesses operating around the port to try to educate them about how they can utilize natural gas as a cleaner alternative fuel. They have a RFP out there to build a natural gas fueling station on the Port Authority. And my first question was, when I sat down with Chairman Longoria and the gentleman that's the executive director of the port, as I said, how many vehicles and pieces of equipment are you running? And it was somewhere over 300. And I said, great, how many of those are natural gas? And they didn't have any. And I said, you really want the people that are utilizing your port facilities to burn cleaner, more efficient vehicles, you have to lead. You have to lead. And so we scheduled an event, it was about a month or so ago in Houston, and brought some people together and spent a day educating people about the options that are available for electric vehicles, the options that are available for natural gas vehicles to operate in and around the port. And at that point in time, the chairman came over to me and she told me that, she says, as we swap out our vehicles, we are going to start investing in natural gas vehicles. So it was nice to hear that commitment. It'll be better when the rubber hits the road, but we've really got to encourage those to do it because they're going to need a place to fuel. So they'll build their own infrastructure on site. And that's what you see with the waste managements of the world. The other companies that are utilizing natural gas for their vehicles are putting in public fueling stations right there where their trucks fuel, so that people that have natural gas vehicles can go over there and fuel. And so then it becomes a revenue generation for companies like Waste Management and others that are doing this. So we've got to convince the port to do it. Now, I know the Port Authority is just a small percentage of the business that's there in the port, but we do. They are the leaders, and we've got to work on some things that maybe we provide some increased incentives for them to really progress getting a fueling infrastructure that's there, not only for trucks, but for the vehicles and electric charging facilities all in one. And then for the vessels as well, because you're going to see more of those marine vessels that burn 1 million gallons of fuel a week. 1 million gallons of fuel a week. And imagine if you could have fuel that's $1 cheaper per gallon. That ROI adds up pretty quick, especially when you go to repower a ship. Let's get that ship running on natural gas and save $1 million a week and reduce emissions at the same time. So we've got to, but yes, I'm interested in working on some things and really trying to push that in the port area.
I think we're going to have a lot of luck with that. November the 11th, 2014 was the 100th year of the opening of the Port of Houston. 1914, I was there last week, and as a member of transportation, and obviously my role in the port. And Janice Longoria and I, we actually discussed some of this, and I can tell you that I was kind of surprised. I represent District 130, which the city of Tomball is the only incorporated city in my district. And Cypress is the largest area, and I know y'all are interested in the school districts because Cypress is the third largest school district in the state of Texas, third behind Houston and Dallas. We have 125,000 students, 89 schools, 11 high schools. I mean, it's a huge school district, but it's an unincorporated city. It's not really, it's not a city at all. It's an area. But by virtue of being at the port, Woodrow Wilson in 1914 used an automatic switch out of the Oval Office to set off a cannon to open the port of Houston. And the U.S. representative that was responsible for the bill and the legislation that brought the port of Houston and opened the port of Houston was Thomas Ball. And the city of Peck, Texas was renamed Tom Ball. So I asked them when they were going to rename Tom Ball to Alan Fletcher, but nobody. They told me whenever I got a support. But no, seriously, I say that to say that there is a relationship between leadership in the Port of Houston and a lot of the business entities as well in our community. But the Port Authority, they are the leaders, and that the Port Authority is made up of businessmen and women that are appointed by, like the county judge gets 2 appointments, and the mayor gets a couple appointments, and then so it's made up of a group of folks that are in the industry and down in the Port of Houston. As you said, that number, the growth is going to be exponential to say the least. But I do believe that based on Jason's leadership and his interaction, and they did call him in to have this event, and I just want y'all to know that while he was in the white suit, slopping around mopping oil, I was on the border and the gunboats, you know,
That's
and
right.
you know. So, Homeland Security, what can I tell you? Next question.
I'll trade you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ken Houston, and I have a question, sort of a general question. I graduated from the university in 1972.
Where would that be, sir?
In Austin,
Oh,
Texas.
okay. Well, I went to Texas Tech, so I would know what you meant when you said the university, but go ahead.
I probably did.
I'm being ugly.
Look
I'm
back
sorry.
2 weeks ago.
Nah.
I graduated in 1972. The state of Texas was ranked 42nd in education in 1972. This year, we ranked 50th. What I'd like to understand, or help me understand, is how that could possibly have happened. How did we go from 42 to 50 in 4 generations?
I think I know.
We were all bombarded during November about how education was going to come back. We were going to replace the $5 billion that was taken out. I don't want to argue about numbers, but I do want to understand how public education has gone steadily downhill with no end in sight. And my children are asking me, how can they afford to send their kids to private school education so they're not in schools, they're ranked as low as 50th. I mean, friends of mine that live outside the state of Texas laugh every year when the education numbers come out. And I just honestly and truly don't understand how that problem can happen in the state of Texas.
Thank you.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Let me just say that I understand your frustration, and I concur with it. I have 5 grandchildren and a 6th one on the way, and I raised 3 that are already grown that have given me those grandchildren in that same school system you're talking about while it was going from whatever it was to worst. We're in a situation in Texas right now where, just like over the situation of the border security, where 4,000 of those young children that were coming into the border illegally ended up in my Cypress district, the Cypress School District, were relocated and placed in that school district. And the reason Texas is having the problem that it's having in education is the influx, the growth. You know, so it's like I said a while ago, we're number 1 in Medicaid fraud, we're number 1 in cargo theft. Well, we're having the problem in education because of our growth as well. But we have a huge responsibility financially to address the bilingual needs and the fact that we have so many quote unquote minorities and illegals that are moving into our system, and that's why the numbers are so that are causing us the problems that we have in Texas today. But to answer your question about the $5 billion, that's a misstatement of what actually occurred. I said when we started a while ago, we've gone into sessions where we were multi-billion-dollar shortfall, and now we're flush with money, theoretically, and that's how the monies get spent. But there was a request for a $5 billion increase in the Texas education monies, and we kept education whole. We didn't cut education at all, not a penny. We kept them whole. This last legislative session, when we had money, we gave them the $5 billion that they asked for originally. So, not to be rude, but it's almost, to me, as a Republican, I refer to it as a Democrat tactic. When they say that we cut them because we didn't give them the raise they asked for, we cut people all over this state. As the gentleman spoke a while ago, 50% out of his program. Education in Texas literally increased. There was no cut whatsoever when they were asking for $5 billion. When we got the money back last time, he and I were involved in making sure they got that $5 billion. And they'll get more this time. But coming from 42nd to 50th, that's horrible. We have a new governor who has a plan about how he wants to address education in Texas. He has a Hispanic wife, the first Hispanic first lady of our great state, and he's aware of the fact that one of our issues in education in Texas is the fact that we have a huge financial responsibility in addressing the quote-unquote bilingual training and education and that aspect of. That's why our numbers have changed. And if you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do, and I'll there's some things that work and some things that don't work. And what doesn't work is Washington, D.C. and Austin running our local schools. And I filed massive comprehensive education reform last session. It's a 60-some-odd page bill, and people said, why are you filing this huge bill? And I refer to the bill as putting the independent back in independent school district. And what it did is this 62-page bill exempted school districts from over 1,100 pages of statute. And I'd ask my conservative colleagues, would you rather be governed by this or would you rather be governed by this? And they all invariably said, oh, that smaller one looks better. It created an opportunity for school districts, giving them an option to opt out of all of the codes except for health and safety. So you want to opt out of all the testing requirements? Great. You have to do testing. It's got to be a nationally normed standardized test. There's one of about 18. The district would choose that. It gave them the freedom to choose it, not do STAR and all these other crazy stuff that we make them do at the state level, the federal government makes them do. And it's unreal, and we've got too much DC and too much Austin in our schools. The independents, the districts need to run themselves. And
I hate to ask the second question, but it's a good follow-up. Whatever happened when you said TxDOT now has 44 vehicles instead of 32 or whatever it was you thought? What steps are going to make TxDOT get more? I mean, I don't know how you ask.
Well, you get rid of ethanol because they're buying E85 to meet the compliance right now. Then they'll start buying electric and natural gas. Yeah, you just get rid of the word ethanol.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're at 9:27.
Okay, I got 3 minutes.
He
You
gets
got
the
3
he gets
minutes.
another
So
question.
There you go.
the last question, hopefully it's related to energy of some sort, but go
School
ahead.
district.
Okay.
My name is Juan Rodriguez from, I'm from Monte Alto, ISD, South Texas, near McAllen, Harlingen area. Well, we're a school of 1,200 kids, and I know y'all are saying about this ethanol, the cleaner engines. What are you gonna do as far as the buses and all that? And as far as our district, we didn't get any more funding. We can't afford to fix our buildings, cleaner energy or newer air conditioners. Is there anything for the new legislature that's gonna do for the small districts as well as the large districts as far as funding?
On the TERP side, and we're looking at that, I know that the TCEQ and the Railroad Commission are working with some smaller school districts right now that happen to be near gas service lines. So if you're talking about building a natural gas station, it helps if you're near a gas service line. And we look at the replacement of vehicles, and you've got to have the financing available. So you got to partner with someone who's willing to come in and make the investment to build the station, to either convert the buses or supply new buses, and then you share in the cost savings of the fuel. I know there are some E&P companies out there that say, you know what, we don't want the cost savings in the fuel, but we want your rigs to run on natural gas that are drilling on our land. And because you're using our natural gas, we know that in the long run, we're going to benefit. And so we've got to find some opportunities like that where you have these third parties that are willing to come in and work with the school districts and then share in the savings of the cost benefits. So we continue to look into TERP in that, and I appreciate your feedback on that, because as we start to shape TERP for the next session, I'll have you as an example to use that we need to help some of these smaller school districts, not only with building efficiencies, but also with the vehicle efficiencies and savings.
Because one of the problems we've had for a long time is the weighted average daily attendance is how they've tried to determine which school districts get what monies per student per day. And so we can take this and figure that, we're going to try to address that this time. I know that that's part of the Governor-elect Abbott's plan, is to try to make it a little more fair. Because I've got, in my district alone, and I have no idea how many Jason has, but I have the Klein School District, a little bit of CATEE, the Tomball School District, a lot of Waller, the Cypress School District, which I indicated a while ago, and every one of them gets a different amount of money every day for every student that shows up. And in the Houston metropolitan area, now you're talking about rural, but we have a lot of smaller communities that in that metropolitan area. Our metro division, a lot of our buses are natural gas now, and a lot of our school buses are trying to convert to that. So I see that's just the future. I mean, those of you that are involved in clean air and clean energy, you are the future of this great state. And I will tell you that you can't get much more conservative than two of us. And you've got a bunch of Republican conservatives in the legislature that are not going to be holding the line on the oil and gas energy from the industry from the standpoint of that's the only way to do it. There's got to be a synergy between the energy industry and clean energy. And I think because of natural gas and because of the role that Texas is taking due to our fracking and the monies that we have, now is the time for people like he and I and people like yourselves to make sure that we're aware of what we can do, because you're involved in an industry that's over my head,
Yeah.
not his.
And then helps us comply with the
As far as,
EPA and the state implementation plan.
Right.
As far as the funding and as education, like the gentleman said a while ago, we need more money also to pay our teachers more, so we can get better, higher grades as far as increasing the.
Teachers,
State-
policemen, firemen.
Yeah, but we can't afford that.
everybody.
We're a poor school district there.
I hear you.
Yeah,
And you
and-
guys are probably in a.
Let's quit
overreach-
building. Let's quit building fancy buildings and start paying people that are working in them.
And the salary schedule is set in Austin, and that shouldn't be the case. It should be
agree.
decided at the local level. You got a good
Okay.
superintendent that wants to pay people what he wants to pay them, shouldn't have to go by some schedule that we set in Austin.
Well,
Thank you.
Please give a round of applause to our guest here.